It was just after 5 p.m. on a chilly fall evening in Ontario, the kind where the sky turns a deep gray and the wind carries a quiet loneliness. Daniel, a local handyman with calloused hands and a tired heart, was packing up his tools when his phone buzzed. The name on the screen read Mrs. Lillian Howard. He squinted at it. She wasn't a regular client. In fact, he didn't recognize the name at all. He answered, and a soft, fragile voice came through. Hi. I'm sorry to bother you, but I was wondering if you could come take a look at my water tank. I think something's wrong with it. I live just outside of town, near the woods. Daniel hesitated. He'd been looking forward to going home to his dinner and the leftover apple pie his daughter had baked the night before. But there was something in her voice. Not fear, not panic, just a quiet desperation. Like asking for help wasn't something she did often. Sure, he said. Text me the address. I'll be there in 20. Lillian's house sat at the end of a long gravel road, partly hidden by pine trees. The porch light was dim and flickering, the kind that looked like it hadn't been changed in years. When she opened the door, Daniel was taken aback. She wasn't as old as he'd imagined. Maybe late 50s, early 60s. She looked tired, though exhausted. Really. Her eyes held a weight he couldn't name, and her sweater sleeves were frayed at the edges. She greeted him with a small smile. The tank's in the basement. Sorry it's such a mess down there. No problem, he replied, stepping inside. The air in the house felt heavy. Not with dust or mildew, something else. Something sad. The basement was dark, lit only by a single overhead bulb. Daniel crouched by the tank, inspecting the pipes. As he worked, he noticed something strange. A mattress in the corner, a pile of kids' books, and a small toy truck. He frowned. You have grandkids? He called up toward the stairs. There was silence. Then her voice came down, shaky. No, not exactly. He didn't press. He finished fixing the pipe. It had been leaking slowly, corroding the base of the tank. As he stood, wiping his hands, he turned back toward the makeshift sleeping area. Mind if I ask, who sleeps down here? After a long pause, Lillian came down the stairs, her hands nervously wringing a dish towel. I used to run a daycare. Years ago. I kept some things in case someone needed them again. Daniel studied her face. Her eyes darted away, avoiding his. You said you don't run it anymore? She shook her head. Stopped when my husband got sick. Then after he passed, I never got around to it again. Something about her answer didn't feel complete. Daniel looked at the toy truck again. It was covered in a thin layer of dust, but it had been moved recently. Just as he was about to leave, he heard it, a soft cough. Not hers. A child's. Coming from somewhere behind the basement wall. His stomach twisted. Mrs. Howard, he said, voice cautious but firm. Is there someone else here? Lillian's eyes welled up. Please don't call anyone, she whispered. Please. Daniel stepped closer. Tell me what's going on. With trembling hands, she led him to a small crawl space hidden behind an old wardrobe. Inside, huddled under a blanket, was a boy. Maybe 6 or 7 years old. Pale, skinny, with large eyes that stared up at Daniel with a mixture of fear and hope. This is Evan, she said, voice cracking. His mother was my neighbor. She was in trouble. Her partner used to hurt her. One night she came running here, covered in bruises, holding Evan's hand. She begged me to hide them. I did. But she left a week later and never came back. I waited. I called her phone. It was disconnected. I don't know where she is. But I couldn't. I couldn't let him go into the system. Daniel stood still, taking it all in. A part of him wanted to say she should have called the police. But another part, the part that had seen what the system sometimes did to kids, understood. This woman wasn't hiding a crime. She was protecting a boy who had no one else. Does he go to school? Daniel asked softly. She shook her head. I try to teach him what I can. But I barely afford food for the two of us. The water tank started leaking weeks ago, and I didn't know what to do. I just couldn't afford another bill. Daniel knelt beside the boy. Hi, Evan, he said gently. The boy didn't speak, but he gave a tiny nod. That night, Daniel didn't go home. He drove to the grocery store, picked up bags of food, and returned with them. Then he called his sister, who worked as a social worker in Toronto. The next few days were filled with quiet chaos. Meetings, phone calls, arrangements. But not once did he think of turning his back on them. 2 weeks later, Lillian sat on her porch, sipping warm tea. Daniel sat beside her. Evan was playing with Daniel's daughter in the yard, his laughter cutting through the autumn air like sunshine. He's smiling again, Lillian said, voice soft with awe. He's safe now, Daniel replied. You saved him. No, she said, looking at Daniel with grateful eyes. You did. He shook his head. You were the first one to show up for him. I just helped finish what you started. The story of Evan and Lillian quietly spread through the town. Neighbors brought food. Someone donated a proper bed for Evan. A retired teacher offered tutoring lessons. It became more than just about a boy and an old woman. It became a story of what a community can be when people choose to care. Daniel never forgot that evening. A simple call to fix a water tank had opened the door to something much bigger. A secret that could have been forgotten. A boy that could have slipped through the cracks. But instead, because someone cared enough to ask questions, and another cared enough to act, they changed everything. And sometimes, that's all it takes. A knock on a door. A stranger who listens. And the courage to do what's right, even when it's hard.